All right, so this is a specific reading for someone. Um, just some. It's just for anonymity's sake. All right, so here we go. So what this person was asking was, or rather, what I offered to read was why they had these hives back in November. So what I'm going to do is share a screen here. Okay. Okay. According to what I'm seeing here, I'm doing a planetary health chart. So we're going to focus a bit on the 12th. I don't know if you could see the pen here, but for the finger, the hand. What I'm seeing here first is Ganymede. Okay, so Ganymede is transiting their 12th house. So Ganymede, according to I discovered here, is something to do with the skin. It is transiting their Niobe, which is also to do with skin. So it makes sense. That's the first thing I would see here, that it makes sense why there would probably be inflammation. But it'd be kind of small at first in this case because it would be tied to the circulatory system. Or I could just cheat through my cheat sheet. But there's so many files open. Okay. See here, the immune system. So I feel like this person has something tied to their immune system. It's also possibly tied to, um, I'm missing here, the nervous system. So might be caused by the nervous system. So they're all connected anyways. Or maybe also the involuntary nervous system. So if they were getting nervous, about things, which is technically kind of what Ganymede is about. Ganymede is kind of unwanted service, also tied to that. So there's a bit of psychological aspect to this one. Although this is a planetary health chart, which is under medical astrology, I'm still going to add a bit of typical called natal. And that totally makes sense. So Ganymede here in this case is wanting of service, wanting to be of service, someone calling out to you, and kind of pulling you out of that service sort of thing. And Niobe is like usually tied to shame. Um, and here it's retrograde. So I would say if there is anything health related, it would still be. I mean, we see here Niobe conjunct Ganymede, also both retrograde. So it'd be kind of a constant thing. Retrograde often means that there's a focus, right? So, especially opposite their Mercury. Mercury often rules also the nervous system itself. So that totally makes sense why they're getting that. Double check here. Because it's tied to, let's see if there's anything causing this one. Square agla, which is also the skin. Um, let's double check what agla is showing me here. 1 second. Yeah, something to do with because it's square, it's in their birth chart. Something about the regeneration here. Is it regeneration that's tied to that? Um is volunteer work. So there must have been some sort of like excess volunteer work. So they might be, because it's tied to volunteer work, it's tied to probably this person wanting to be of service or sort of be of kind of help to others, especially when it comes to people that are teaching them. It's here in in Gemini in the ninth house, so it's still tied to something related to some sort of teaching thing. Maybe they're kind of stressed out about it. I would say, their mind is affected. And Mercury here rules Gemini. So that totally makes sense why there's also that square aspect in their birth chart anyways. And Ganymedes are transiting kind of almost like a revisit. I'm seeing here it's almost like they've had this before, might be going through again. So also opposite of Hebe here. Hebe is at approximately about 3 degrees conjunct their own natal Mercury. So it's something to do with the foot, something to do with, like I said, with the Virgo placements here. So the lymphatics, immune system, the nervous system is tied to that. Something about the nervous system. Agla here kind of maybe doesn't want to do this. There's a part of it wanting to, having thoughts about it. So it is connected to the system. It's very powerful how the physical works with the mind, right? So that totally makes sense. Let's see here. You also hear panacea. There must be some sort of healing that needs to take place or that they were trying to take place. They're trying to happen to, so that it happens. Um, but panacea is often tied to quick solutions, like quick fixes and all that stuff, because um, it is tied to skin as well. There could a bit of just applying a lot of ointments. That kind of makes sense. It's a skin thing, right? Maybe they were even, I don't know if they were contemplating surgery or anything like that. Any sort of quick cures, right? Balms, ointments, liniments, counter irritants, any sort of dressings. It says here alcohol, so it might have been putting some sort of alcohol. I don't know if that's included in alcohol, like drinking alcohol, but definitely like the kind of alcohol, like, peroxide kind of stuff. Poultices, dressings, okay? So to kind of and reduce the inflammation. I'm gonna close this other one. That one's distracting. Let's see here. Um, Wondering if there's anything in 27. It is okay. You have a 25 degrees. Okay, okay. Anubis. Okay, so something Nikia said, something to do with a return. We have here the birth chart. Anubis conjunct South Node, a North Node, and Hecate. So if it's that polarity between Gemini and Sagittarius, I would have to say that it's tied to the nervous system. There's something about voluntary nerves, the central nervous system. Also, respiratory system is tied to this as well, because it reflexes onto those signs. But there are planets in those. We have rather actually in their south node. I noticed here, a, Saturn retrograde. So they have had this skin stuff anyways from what would be considered past lives. It's part of their, in a way, it's part of their journey. But retrograde, but kind of like unusual because it's retrograde. I don't know if that applies in medical astrology, but Saturn is usually things to do with things that aren't really inflamed, but rather possibly kind of, yes, but it's retrograde. So that means that there kind of is unusual skin related things, but tied to the nervous system, or rather, what is it? Yeah, tied to the nervous system. So again, it goes back to the whole thing. Hecate here is also part of that. So there might have been some sort of past life wise, we're really referring back to things like more esoteric things. Hecate here symbolizes this person's past life experiences when it comes to um, not knowing what medicine to use, not knowing what kind of, I guess you could say, potions to use, right? Hecate is tied to technically witchcraft. Um, there's something else there. I want to go deeper into this one. Yeah, far-reaching skills, ability to heal, um, going through time when it comes to healing itself. It's almost like timelessness, maybe also self-nurturing. It's in the sign of Gemini, so it's in the critical degrees or the anaretic degrees of Gemini. So there's a strong pull to, in a way, kind of go through the process of healing themselves, especially their philosophy is tied to their careers as well. So I can see why there's that thing. She's also tied to elusiveness, instinct, revealing kind of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that could be done about it. But there's a doubt there, and then there's a sort of a questioning. That's usually what retrogrades represent. Um, so it feels like it's sort of ongoing sort of thing, right? Maybe toxins is also tied to this one. See, medicine, poison, toxins. So with time, this can heal, but the square placement to Panacea here squaring that shows me that they could heal it. There's a trine, there's a grand trine here to the water signs actually. Actually, there's air, air, and water here to Mercury. But also Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah here is tied to also, right, tied to inflammation. So because it's in Aquarius, I would say it's also tied to the nervous system. So a lot of this is tied to a lot of the nervous system stuff, but can also be inexplainable. If we look at their Uranus right here, it's in Libra, so something to do with releasing stress in the suprarenal adrenal glands. Okay. And retrograde Uranus here feels like there's a pullback to what needs to be done about it, like a sort of a revolutionary approach, changes that need to happen. They know this, um, but it's in their first house. It's also part of the body, but it's also with Pele. You have your conjunct. There's a lot of retrograde planets here, so it's a lot of doubt with their own specific gifts. That's why maybe they feel like they should do this. They ought to do this. So there's a lot of questioning about in terms of service. So it ties in with their body, ties in with their health, it's things that have become unconscious, also past life related, but also subconscious things that maybe weren't really addressed. So it feels like it's coming back through as a reminder. And you have here Sisyphus, also tied to the skin as well. Hard work that plays itself. I have myself Sisyphus in the first house, but hers is transiting. Here, Sisyphus is actually conjunct Uranus with Pele, but it's more tied to the second house, which is when it comes to money making. There's a sort of hard work that's pushed in. It's almost like pushing, 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 where it feels kind of like fruitless. That's usually what Sisyphus represents. Um, let's double check here. Uh, there might be some sort of like things that are done at all costs. Maybe just probably pushing it, especially with it being in Libra. There's a sort of like peace at all costs. So that's what explains why they've had to usually use Panacean methods, so to speak. It's also tied to Helio, which also ties in with that whole I might not necessarily shine because I'm of service. Helio is also service. Shining that does not really shining. Helio was one of the Titan gods in mythology. So he's tied to, he wasn't on the side of the Titans. He was on the side of the Olympians. So he was kind of used in a way. So he wasn't really shining. He was kind of like a dimmed sun, if that makes sense. Tied that to Sisyphus, and that makes sense. Like there's a tendency to work through things, to um, do things at all costs, just for the sake of service. And I'm not judging them or anything like that, right? Sisyphus is also tied to, I'm noticing here, quid pro quo. Um, there's a sort of not to, again, this is not a judgment, it's just saying cheating or escaping death. In this case, probably escaping things like this. Things like maybe it's, tied to self-worth. So I feel like there's a lot of nervous system related things here. Their Uranus is in conjunct. It's the cut basically less than 5 degrees to their second house cusp. That shows us self-worth stuff, self-worth related stuff. It's like, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. And it's almost like, oh, I don't have a choice or something like that. Maybe they feel kind of powerless with this. We also have here retrograde Pluto. That explains the powerlessness, which is actually trying to their sun Jupiter. So typically with those placements, it means that they're not necessarily shining themselves. They feel that or at least back then when you're younger. So I feel like this is kind of almost like a domino effect. It's almost related to that. I'm trying to make this as quick as possible. I'm speaking quickly here. There's also moon transiting here. So which shows that something's to do with, I was going to say disillusion, but it's like the part of the body that is related to distribution of life force. Okay. It's about usually about moisturizing. That explains that. Right. So there's a lot of moisturizing with the skin here. Um, Something to do with maybe, let's see if it's square to, there are any planets here? Hmm, yes, we have here the moon transiting, was transiting the first house here. About, what is that? About 6 degrees. It's actually square Cleo and Ubasti. Cleo and Ubasti here do represent skin as well. Um, so there's something about stress at home, right? You have here so many things. You have your Heim, you have your Sekhmet, Bacchus, Heimdall, all conjunct, transiting planets conjunct your Clio, and also Ubasti here, the natal Ubasti, not the transiting Ubasti. So those have to do with inflammation, with hard work. It's also to do with skin because it's in Capricorn, definitely a skin thing, right? But it's in the home. That explains that whole process. Let's take a look at Bacchus. Maybe there's some sort of excess stuff. Bacchus is definitely tied to wine. So there must have been some sort of tying to, what do you call this? Is it even square Pluto? I would say probably, yeah. There's a square to Pluto here. Um, Maybe they were taking alcohol for some reason. There was some sort of, maybe there's a bit too much, maybe. There wasn't a lot of like decomposition, meaning like sort of a way to detox, especially because of the place, because of Pluto. Pluto represents detoxification, release of waste, and all that stuff. So, mistakes probably were done. They probably had to learn from this whole thing. Yeah, but Bacchus is also excess, right? So there must have been some sort of excess happening here. It is no, there's nothing tied to the seventh house, which is reflexes also to Aries, but there's nothing there. It could be that Basti here is in her birth chart is a square Eris, and Eris also represents the skin. So there must have been sort of because of relationships, they're wanting to change things. Maybe there's sort of a maybe you can say she's a revolutionary, but she's kind of a test that's been done, being tested, being tested, and being tested, and being tested. So relationships tend to be a test for her. So there must have been because it's square Ubasti, it's almost like the home environment is being challenged by these people that it comes across. So it causes a bit of inflammation, which, by the way, is tied to stress as well. Eris is in Aries, just like its polarity sign. In Libra, they're both about stress hormones, right? So definitely has something to do with relationships, maybe excess drinking alcohol. I don't know what it was. Some sort of like non-detox stuff. So that can sort of apply here. What else do I see here? Sixth house, transiting Hebe, Mullo, and Agla. We have contact conjunct. Let's double check here. Mala is also the skin, more like healing of the skin. Right? Mala is one of the Celtic gods in history. Mm, so emotional distressy, wounds, yeah. And gauzes. So there must have been some sort of gauze applied here. Maladies, conditions. So something to do with healing process. So in this case, I would say Mala's showing me that there's some sort of healing process that they're going through, especially because it's Pisces. It is tied to the nervous system. Let me double check that again. But it's also tied to what did I say that? Sorry, immune system and then lymphatics, right? Again, the nervous system, right? Or the sympathetic nervous system. But it's also something to do with the feet. Um, if there's not enough water in the body, that's usually pops up. Let's see, reflexes and two. back then, going back to the whole process, it does reflect into 9 degrees, into Ganymede as well, their natal Ganymede, but also to Agla as well, and also back to Neptune. That makes sense. So there's some sort of like a disillusion that could have been happening. So there's inflammation. That inflammation process could have been soothed. I would say it was being soothed by that. So Agla is also is yes, it's skin, but Agla is like how is she different from the other health related asteroids? Something to do with beauty. Right? So um she's more about beauty. So if there was some sort of thing that needed to happen, it was probably tied to the skin. So it's really about dermatology too. So skin dermatology, skincare products. So maybe they were applying more of that stuff, but instead maybe should have also been putting in more into the body. I do see her Mars. It's square. Technically, it's square Mercury here, but it's also square Mullo and Igla. And it's definitely also square Niobe, Needham, Niobe, and Ganymede, and also the transiting Ganymede. So there's like sort of uh, something to do with friends as well. Maybe having their friends along help dissolve that. Neptune is about disillusion, but Mars transiting here and their conjunct to Pluto, to Neptune, shows me that there's sort of maybe overheating of like maybe warm water instead of cool water, maybe. Um, uh, so I'm wondering if there's something tied to because of this the trine, I want to say Neptune is trine Eris here with Mars there transiting, showing me that maybe they had help somehow. I don't know what it was. There's something about that. They were helping something, well, some kind of personal relationship or someone that was kind of like adding to the stress. But I also see here 11 degrees Varuna. He's also about skin, but it's retrograde. And Varuna I want to sing this song, Jamaica, ooh, I want to take. So there's sort of an what do you call this? Collagen, something to do with collagen, because he's about binding. Baruna's about binding, sealed things, right? Putting things together, bridging things together. There could have been some sort of not only ointment, but some sort of like maybe a what do you call those? I used to wear those because I had eczema before. What is that called? Um, Steroids. There you go. So there must have been something to do with steroids. I don't know what it was. Right? But it also probably caused there's something to do with the heart. Some sort of group collective there. It's in its 11th house. So there must have been sort of like maybe a friend was helping them or uh, some friends because it's retrograde. Maybe it usually represents retrogrades represent little things or sorry, quiet, private things. So it's something to do with that. Maybe they learned from a community that they had to go through some sort of steroid. I don't know if they applied steroid. I'm just saying that's a possibility. But anything to bind the skin together again, the dermatologist, right? So, um, yeah, I can see that right here. With Agla being in 9 degrees, it's actually it's quincunx to the also transiting Varuna. So, but also transiting Pele Moon. So there could have been some sort of someone nurturing them, some supporting them with that inflammation. But again, it could also be tied to relationships or how they would probably present themselves. So I feel like this is not only just some sort of physical thing, hugely psychological as well, somatic, right? Psychosomatic. Again, it's not a judgment. I'm just saying this is what I'm seeing here. Okay. Um, What I'm seeing so far with this one. Okay, let's look at the eighth house. I have Cleo here tied to that as well. So skin, yeah, tied to automatic degrees of Aries. Does it reflex into Cancer, Capricorn? Ah, okay. So the kidneys, so again, waste products. So maybe they're not getting enough water, or because it's square, it could be the lack of water, or maybe too much water. Either way, right? Venus often represents like enjoyment as well, like leisure, fun, like the kind of easy stuff, but it could also represent slight little tumors or excess stuff. It's tied to Jupiter as well. Both are tied to leisure, especially with medical astrology. Um, yeah, that's what I'm seeing here. Thea is also that, but Thea is about transformation. So there must have been some sort of like, let's see here. What do you do with progesterones? Ah, there you go. See, steroids, anabolic steroids, testosterone, that kind of stuff, anti-inflammatory. So steroids. I knew there was something to do with steroids. Okay, so they are applying steroids somehow, or they could have been applying steroids. But the here is in skin. So is it opposite of 12 degrees? Is it opposite of anything here? Yeah, we have here opposite of transiting Venus, Venus Tyche. So Tyche is also tied to water. Tyche is like swimming as well. But Taiki is tied to conscious or unconscious luck or fate. So maybe there's sort of like, in this case, they're transiting because transiting the eighth house is not just a health thing. It's also things that maybe are things that they are not able to control. It's the house of death, house of taboo, house of, when I say death, I don't mean literal death. I mean transformations, taboo, things that we don't want to look into, things that are like, it's scary, right? Things that bring trouble. This is a house of troubles as well. So maybe there's some sort of like in a not sureness sort of feel, like fickleness. I'm not saying the person is fickle, I'm just saying. Okay. Um, boundaries need to be met probably. Okay, let's see here. And also clotho here. So transiting cloth. That totally makes sense. More to skin, again, detox because it is through Scorpio and it is through Taurus. So the opposite signs showing me that something was put in their body that needed to be also released. And if they didn't, they could have been triggering the skin stuff as well. 12 degrees Venus. Verona is square to that. It's reflexing onto Leo. It's also probably reflexing onto Amphitrite as well. So having to have boundaries when it comes to fun things, sometimes this person would need to have boundaries, what they put in their bodies. They can still enjoy things, but not necessarily if it's too much or if it's too little, maybe. So kind of learning how to balance that stuff. Right? Again, because of the South Node, North Node placement, I feel like it's tied to um, that sort of uncertainty about what to do with skin, right? So if that's the case, then that means that they're really learning a lot. They have to learn through it again and again and again, especially when it comes to skin. That totally makes sense. Knowing this person, it's just like, oh yeah, so many issues with skin. So I would say nervous system detox is very important. Stress. Those are the things that they have to minimize, and they really have to learn how to choose to do that, even though sometimes they want to help and they want to also make money to be stable, etc., etc. There's a kind of that's it's a way it's adding to the stress. So I always say there has to be a way to. In my case, I learned to surrender with many things in life, like literally surrender to it and not force things. But we all have free will, we have choice. So that's what I'm just gonna say with that one. Is there anything I'm seeing here? That's all I can say. So when it comes to those kind of things, steroids, minimal use, things that are not so natural, because they are here to learn about, or say, releasing a lot of ideas or thoughts they've had in past lives, or that, they should really learn to let that go. But I would say, hmm, trying to figure out what it is. The relationships are kind of iffy and questionable for them. their sun is in Aquarius, but the modern ruler, not Uranus, and then Saturn here is also Gemini. Both are retrograde. To me, that shows right away. It's almost like, I don't know about certain people. I don't know if I can relate with them. It's not very fun for me. Part of their philosophy is tied to that, but also tied to career. They're very much drawn to careers. If they are very, because Saturn here is in the South Node, it's connected to South Node. They're very tied to their career, vocation, and it's tied to Gemini. There's this full desire to know things. Um, Depending on what it's retrograde to, I would say it's probably already retrograde to Cancer. So that means that this person is, their Saturn is most likely tied to feeling more secure. If it's not retrograde, then that means that they've already fully expressed their Saturn inside them. They're part of the psyche, which is letting go of the fears of security, moving past all that stuff, and actually just embracing the change, embracing what's new, what's unpredictable, right? So Saturn is tied to that, especially when it comes to security and security of career. Let's see here. The wounding is the Chiron here. Chiron is often tied to health as well, which is rules, um, which rules by Virgo, which is actually part of their ascendant. It rules, Chiron rules, and also with Mercury. So it's wounding with knowing what to do with their freedom, knowing what that really means. Is it freedom as an external freedom, or is it actually more like process, internalized stuff? So I would say because of the Chiron placement here, uh, there's a way to go about it. They need to do, I don't know, this is just unsolicited advice. I would say they to go through shadow work. Go deep, go deep, go deep, go deep, go deep. So that's my thing, because I would feel like this is psychosomatic, if anything. So if I get it wrong, then it's fine. This is part of the reading, this is part of risk of giving astrological readings. But I think that's about it. There was a lot of asteroids here, but I didn't really cover some of them because um, they're more symbolic. It's not really of the body, but they can be. A lot of it is also knowing when it's boundaries. When I say boundaries, I mean it's not refusing other people. It's more like this is what I want, which I'm based on what how I know this person. They've already set those boundaries quite a lot, but there's still subconscious stuff, right? It is tied to Leo. Leo, the sun rules their 12th house. That's the house of subconscious. Aquarius rules their sixth house, so you have Saturn, Uranus here. That totally makes sense why it is that that is the case. So nervous system related to skin, related to the heart, or rather related to their sense of vitality, what makes them really happy, to be free, to be kind of just their own, I would say their own creator, if anything. Meaning when I say their own creator, I mean co-created with the universe, God, source, energy, whatever you want to call it, right? It's really creating and trusting the moment and not being so caught up with earthly conditioned stuff. I know it's like being practical sometimes based on what they told me, but sometimes you have to balance things between your all of your elements within, right? Fire, earth, air, water. They all work together. They're not separate from each other. Can't always be practical, can't always be imaginative, can't always be inspired, can't always be motivated, can't always be thinking, can't always be feeling. There's a time and place for so many things, but they all work together. In fact, they all work together simultaneously. We just don't feel it. We just, as humans, we're in our thought, in our thinking. So I think that's it. Now, a lot of it is definitely internal work, because I see that here. There can be healing physically, and therefore all this other stuff as well. So, anyways, I hope that helps. Thank you very much for watching. For those who are watching this in my channel, I'll see you guys later.